Welcome to Green Time. I'm host Don Fitz. This episode we're going to be talking about cosmetics, the true story. What are the environmental implications of cosmetics? I have with me a couple of guests who have looked into different aspects of the issue of cosmetics. I have Christen Gates, who is an environmental consultant. Christen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Don.
And also Mare Florentino, who is with the St. Louis Animal Rights Team. Do I have that right?
You do, thank you.
And who'd you bring with you?
Peekaboo.
Peekaboo, who is going to be very calm and relaxed during the show. But before we get into our discussion, let's take a look at the story of cosmetics.
This is a story about a world obsessed with stuff. It's a story about a system in crisis. We're trashing the planet, we're trashing each other, and we're not even having fun. The good thing is that when we start to understand the system, we start to see lots of places to step in and turn these problems into solutions. Can I tell you, I love my Pantene Pro V. Of the dozen or so personal care products that I use every day, it's the one I can't live without. It says it gives my dull hair the ultimate cool shine. How does it do that? I was wondering that while I was lathering it in my hair one day, so I read the ingredients right here. Sodium lauryl sulfate, tetrasodium EDTA, methyl isothiazolinone. What is this stuff? I took this list to some scientists who know how to read it. Turns out my Pantene contains a chemical linked to cancer. And lots of other products in my bathroom, from sunscreen to lipstick and even baby shampoo, also contain chemicals linked to cancer or other problems like learning disabilities, asthma, and even damaged sperm. Like most parents, I try to keep my family safe. But now I find out my bathroom is a minefield of toxins? What are we supposed to do? To find out the answers, we have to go back to one of the key features of our materials economy: toxics in, toxics out. If, at the factory, you pour toxic chemicals into a product, like baby shampoo, you're going to wind up with toxic baby shampoo, and toxics in workers, communities, and, babies. So let's take a closer look at this toxic outrage where it seeps into our lives every day, in the bathroom. The average woman in the U.S. uses about 12 personal care products daily. The average man about 6. Each product containing a dozen or more chemicals. Less than 20% of chemicals in cosmetics have been assessed for safety by the industry's safety panel, so we just don't know what they do to us when we use them. Would you fly on an airline that only inspects 20% of its planes? Of course, not all of these chemicals are dangerous, but we know that many are. Some are carcinogens. That means that they can cause cancer. Others are neurotoxins and reproductive toxins, proven to mess up brain development and reproduction in animals. Wait a minute, we're animals too. It's like a giant experiment. We're using all these mystery chemicals and just waiting to see what happens. One thing we do know is that they're getting inside us. I had my body's toxicity levels tested, and I'm loaded with things like mercury, flame retardants, triclosan, and lead. We all are. Even babies are being born pre-polluted. Now, I know we can't live in a lead-free world, but do we have to put lead in our lipstick? I don't know. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I just bought the wrong thing. At the store, the choices seem endless. I can get lipstick in 49 shades, or shampoo for hair that's too dry, oily, fine, limp, or frizzy. But what about the choices that really matter? Like the choice to buy products that are safe? It turns out the important decisions don't happen when I choose to take a product off the shelf. They happen when companies and governments decide what products should go on the shelves. So who are these companies? This is Procter & Gamble. They're the ones offering me Herbal Essences, the #2 shampoo in the country. It contains toxic petrochemicals made from oil. Since when is oil an herb? On cosmetics labels, words like herbal, natural, even organic have no legal definition. That means that anybody can put anything in a bottle and call it natural, and they do. I mean, can you imagine a top seller called Petro Essences? Gross. What's even nastier are hair relaxers marketed to 5-year-olds and skin whitening creams. These are super toxic, both in their ingredients and in the message they send about what beauty is. Oh, here's Estee Lauder offering me a chance to help find a cure for breast cancer. That's nice. But wait, they're also using chemicals linked to cancer. Don't you think the best way for Estee Lauder to fight cancer is to stop using those chemicals in the first place? So really, I get to choose between meaningless claims on a bottle. But these guys get the real choice about what goes into those bottles. And that happens back here, at the factories where they're formulated. Why do the makers of these products use all these toxics? Are they trying to poison us? No, they're just working from a 1950s mindset when people were totally swept up in better living through chemistry. In all that excitement, they forgot to worry about human health impacts. That was years ago, and they are still using these same old toxic chemicals. Today, big cosmetics companies say the doses of poison in their products are small enough to be harmless. Yeah, maybe if you use them once a year. I guess they never get out and see that their products are being used and combined with other products every day. A little toxic dose under your arms, a little more on your hair, on your lips. And workers in nail and hair salons get dosed all day long. So the industry is used to doing things this way, and they can. Because even now that scientists have linked the chemicals they're using to all sorts of problems, there are no laws to get rid of them. You're thinking, really? Come on, nobody's making sure that the stuff we smear all over our bodies is safe? Nope. The FDA doesn't even assess the safety of personal care products or their ingredients. Since 1938, they've banned just 8 out of over 12,000 ingredients used in cosmetics. They don't even require that all of the ingredients be listed on the label. Now, this is an example where we can all agree a little more government action would be helpful. This lack of regulation leaves a huge hole that the cosmetics industry is all too happy to fill. They set up their own committee to self-police their products, and compliance with their recommendations is voluntary. So the cosmetics industry is making the rules and then deciding whether or not to follow them. So you see, it isn't our fault that these toxic products are in our bathrooms. It's a whole broken system that's ignoring the simple rule: toxics in, toxics out. But we're not helpless. There are resources online that we can use to protect ourselves by identifying the best possible choices in the store. But the real action is with people working to change the system. Because if we really want to solve this problem, we got to start here with these guys. Women, parents, workers, people all over the country are demanding that Congress pass a new law, giving FDA the power to make sure that our personal care products are safe. We need common sense laws based on the precautionary principle. That means that when you're dealing with hazardous chemicals, just err on the side of caution. Let's not debate how much lead should be allowed in lipstick. Just get the toxic chemicals out of our products. Smarter laws would force companies to get past that old 50s mindset and figure out how to get us all clean and shiny without toxic chemicals. Can they? Totally. Many responsible cosmetics companies are already putting safer products on the market. Green chemists are developing substances that are designed to be safe and non-toxic in the first place. European governments have required the removal of many toxic chemicals, and companies have figured out how to comply. When cosmetics are reformulated to be safe and labeled honestly, then we can feel comfortable with the choices available at the store. We can choose bouncy hair or full hair, shiny lipstick or matte. We can even choose to feel beautiful without using 20 products. But we'll know that whatever we choose, the most important choice, the choice to be safe and healthy, has already been made.
Welcome back to Green Time. I'm host Don Fitz, and like I mentioned before, I have with me for this episode Christen Gates, who is an environmental consultant, and Mare Florentino with the St. Louis Animal Rights Team, and Peekaboo. Peekaboo. Now, Christen, what were some of the things that really hit you about the DVD?
Well, I think the important thing to take away is the idea that a lot of these products we're using on a daily basis. For example, women, throughout a day, they're using about 12 products. Men, they're using about 6. And a lot of them have known carcinogens, neurotoxins, and reproductive toxins. Sorry, that's a mouthful.
So when we're talking about them, it's probably better to use the phrase personal care cosmetics.
Yes.
I mean personal care products, because the word cosmetics, that's associated with women, and a lot of times we'll think that women are the only people who use these products, when personal care products, that extends to both genders and children as well, doesn't it?
Exactly. So your shaving creams and your deodorants are counted as not just cosmetics, personal care products.
And what are some of the, damages that some of the health risks that you see from these?
Right, so when you're using these personal care products, they can be absorbed through your skin, they can be absorbed when you accidentally inhale them, they can be, even a mother can pass any of these toxins that get into their system into their placenta that gets into their child. And in this case, they can use these toxins, kind of create a mixture while they're in your body, and you're not really sure what can happen.
Okay, but a lot of the personal care products that we see in the store have a label of natural or organic or safe. So if you see those labels, you can pretty much assume that that's okay to use, can't you?
Unfortunately, that's not the case. And you can go online to the Federal Trade Administration's website, and they will describe to you in detail how there is no legal meaning for what organic, herbal, what these words really mean. So you have to be careful.
And what are some of the disorders that people can get? You know, what are some of the things that are linked with some of these products?
Well, carcinogens is probably the most important thing everybody talks about.
A lot of things can lead to cancer.
Exactly.
And when corporations talk about these, a lot of times they'll say, well, the exposure is such a small level that it's not really a threat. Do you find, in the reading that you've done, would you conclude that if it's a tiny amount of lead in lipstick or a tiny amount of some other toxin in another product, that makes the product okay?
The problem is, just like food or any other product commercial entities are selling, it's hard to explain what any entity's exposure and dose is to these chemicals that are in these compounds. And once again, when they mix together with other compounds from other personal care products in your body, you don't know what can happen. So it's a dangerous mixture.
It's a bad mixture of a whole lot of different things, and you're getting the toxins summing from all of the other different ways that you get that you get toxins. Well, Mare, tell me, I know that there used to be a concern about personal care products being tested on animals, but has that pretty much been taken care of with recent legislation?
Not at all. No, every 2 seconds an animal dies in testing cosmetics, and cosmetics, household products, and you know what you generally think of as cosmetics, makeup and so forth. But everything, no, is still tested. This country is lagging way behind Europe. There is supposed to be a push for alternative testing, and if we want to stay current with you know, international trade, we're going to have to get on board, because Europe is going to phase out by 2013 any products that have been tested on animals. Right now, certain phases, there's, you know, several tests, like Christen said, you know, for testing for carcinogens and neurotoxicity.
Well, could we back up? Could you tell me what's the history of animal testing with personal care products? Do you know how it was first done and how it's evolved?
Yeah, I mean,
over
if
the
you
years?
want to go back, you know, there was the famous case of Lashler prior to 1938, when it was a coal tar derivative that was in it. It dyed your eyelashes, and it caused several women to go blind. One woman got such a severe infection she died from it. That's sort of what prompted the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act when the FDA started to regulate the whole industry in 1938.
So it's 1938 that the first regulation started of the personal care products.
That's correct, because, you know, prior to that, anything went. I mean, you know, about all the quackery, you know, people were selling you snake oil and you know, whatever, and I mean, it was, and drugs too. I mean, everything was totally unregulated.
And Christen, there haven't been very many products actually banned since 1938, has there?
Exactly. Since 1938, only 8 out of 12,000 ingredients.
8 out of 12,000.
That's what they quote now.
Doesn't sound like a very strict federal regulation.
Not exactly.
Okay, but where do the animals come into this? I mean, if you want a product which is okay for people to use, you know, you're not going to put lipstick on a pig or eyelashes on a dog.
Well,
Why would you use an animal?
We're not talking so much about the finished product. You know, when this all came to light about animal testing, you know, like in the 80s especially, and actually it was in 1959 when 2 British authors came out with the idea of reducing, refining, and replacing animal testing. You know, it's not so much just, you know, the finished product like the lipstick and that, but it's the ingredients that go into it.
So what would they expose animals to these?
Oh yeah,
okay.
they do, and to such an extreme that it far exceeds what people would be exposed to. And
so what would they, could you give me an example of one of the ingredients and what would be done with an animal to expose the animal?
Okay, if you take, you know, an ingredient and, well, even pesticides, I mean, they'll expose them through inhalation, and it used to be the LD50 test, which was where they would administer a product to a set of animals until 50% of them died. It's very crude and it's very cruel.
You kill half the animals?
You kill half the animals, and then from that, you know, you're supposed to extrapolate that information to humans, and it's very unscientific.
Well,
and actually, the first test back in 1928, when they did the LD50, but the FDA actually had commissioned Dr. John Drays to perform, you know, to develop a test to see how corrosive substances were in the eyes and on the skin. And so the famous eponymous Drays test is where they would put these caustic substances in the eyes of restrained rabbits, and they would shave the skin and apply the substance to the skin. And then they would shave another area as the control, and they would just observe what happened. And the dermis of animals varies from species to species.
Well, that's what I was thinking about when you're describing this. It's, I mean, the biochemistry of each species is different. I know when I read a lot about dioxin, which is a byproduct of a lot of industrial processes, dioxin is the most deadly man-made substance known, but only to people. There's entire species that are not affected.
Yeah, I mean, cigarette smoking was delayed because of the, you know, the testing that they did in rats. I mean,
so it seems very odd to think that you're going to know how toxic a substance is to people by looking at rabbits or looking at some other species.
That's correct. Yeah, it's very hard to extrapolate that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of alternative research testing going on. Currently, in 2000, Clinton signed into law the Interagency Coordinating Committee for the Validation of Alternative Testing Methods. And the counterpart in Europe, like I said, is far exceeding us. They're coming out with some really good tests. In this country, you know, in 10 years, they validated 3 alternative tests. And
you mean 3 ways of judging the toxicity of a
right,
substance
they
other
have
than
have validated,
not using animals.
Right, they had validated, you know, the animal test to the alternative test. They have to validate it, then they have to promote it, and they share it with the other agencies. There's 15 agencies in the government that are part of that. And unfortunately, that agency doesn't exactly have the authority to force them to do it. They can promote it. And there's also an international agency of 31 countries that, you know, they sort of share this information and try to, you know, encourage companies to use it and update it. But for some reason, I don't know why, we are very slow here to move in that direction, and we're gonna have to do it.
Okay. Well, how? This is the big question that I want to toss to both of you. If you don't use animals, how do you tell if a substance is toxic, if it's going to harm people?
I have something to say on this topic.
Okay.
There is a growing piece of research in this field that's using cells in basically a petri dish, not too far from stem cell research, but it's an idea that you can, just with a few number of human cells, test the toxicity of some of these chemicals that are going in to our personal care products.
So you might scrape off a few layers of skin, or you might maybe take something from the inside of your mouth, or something like that, and then you stick something on it. I know I've seen a DVD that I've used in class about mercury poisoning. They use just a few cells, and then they can see the example. So, Mare, would that make it more legitimate? Because I would think that if you want to know what the effect of a substance is on human tissue, you would use human tissue instead of
sure they do.
Tissue.
One of the first tests that the Interagency Committee did validate was Corrositex, and that is a way that they can check corrosivity on skin. And there's also several good eye irritancy tests that they've developed. Unfortunately, they use eyes from cows that were from slaughterhouses. There's a chicken one, but there are a lot of skin tests, alternative skin tests that use human skin, and they even have at Harvard, they developed, it's called lung on a chip, where they can do a lot of inhalation toxicity testing. And so yeah, I mean, it's a huge field. And some companies bypass the whole government validation, and they just go ahead and use it. I mean, there's no law that says that you have to do animal testing.
Right.
The FDA and the Consumer Product Safety Commission does not require that.
I want to toss you all a couple of questions that may be a little more difficult, but they're bigger questions. One of the things which they mentioned very briefly in the DVD was that the substance can be toxic because of the concept that it portrays of beauty. Christen, do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, as a young woman, you definitely feel the pressure to fit in and fit into that mold. I'm sure many high school girls could speak to that greater than I can. But
well, that's exactly why I wanted to have women as guests on this show, because a guy can very easily say, I don't need all that junk. But it's much harder, for a woman to...
For me, it's a social feeling. I mean, I feel better about myself when I don't have to put on makeup and feel beautiful, like right now.
Okay, so you didn't put on makeup before the set.
No, I didn't.
Okay, great.
I agree, yeah. I mean, what she says, what Annie Leonard said about minimizing, and that's great, but there are a lot of good alternative products. I mean, when she's out there talking about her Pantene Pro-V, I mean, definitely avoid that. I mean, we go so far as to say, buy safe products, buy products that aren't tested on animals, because there are good products out there that are natural. If you actually, stick with products that are tried and true, that don't have new animal testing, they are considered cruelty-free because a lot of stuff has been tested, just not necessarily for every, possible way. Like, you're not going to test it for environmental. And that's what I think that the Chemical Safety Act is probably going to push for a lot of things to be tested in that regard.
Christen, let me ask you this. Do you remember the phrase pink washing?
Yes.
Tell us what that means.
Basically, it's a way of saying we are going to, I don't know if I can describe this as well.
But it's basically saying that we're going to deal with breast cancer when in fact they're doing nothing.
Oh, exactly.
And what did they say about Estee Lauder in the DVD?
That they were promoting that a donation would be made from their company to Estee Lauder to breast cancer.
And then what does Estee Lauder have in it?
Carcinogens.
Carcinogens. And actually, in some of the write-ups, if you watch this DVD is very readily available on the web. But it has all of the sources that they have. And if you look at the sources, they say that there's several cosmetic companies that are carcinogenic.
But there's many that's doing it right. And there's a lot of resources online right now that can let you know where to buy the products, which products are good, and what elements in those products you should stay away from because of animal testing or because they have carcinogens in them. Okay,
and there is a logo that you can look at, isn't there, for animal testing?
Right. The American Anti-Vivisection Society, and there's actually 9 other large animal rights organizations that have the Leaping Bunny program.
Okay.
And that is the only label that it guarantees that these products are cruelty-free. When it first became popular in the 90s, you start to see a lot of companies that did little, they designed their own little bunny labels and logos to put on their products, sort of to deceive people. And a lot of times you'll see not the finished product not tested on animals, or even if it just claims it's not tested on animals, it's not guaranteed. I mean, you have to look for the Leaping Bunny logo, and they'll guarantee it.
And unfortunately, Christen, it's really hard to do that with toxins, isn't it? Because such a small number of toxins. I mean, you can't really have a logo that says this is toxin-free, because there's so few have been tested. Okay, Christen, we just have a few minutes left. What do you think are some of the major issues that we should take away in thinking about how cosmetics can affect people?
Well, I think the most important thing anyone should take away is they have the power to vote with their dollar. So that means when you go to the store, if you're an informed consumer, you should buy the right products. And that puts pressure on the companies and the government to make policies in that direction, because consumers drive the market. So we have the power to make the difference here.
To some extent, because only 20% of the chemicals have actually
assessed for safety.
Actually assessed for safety. Is there any sort of legislation that you think might be useful?
I think definitely having legislation that would require all the products on all the ingredients on such products to be labeled. Because when I go out there and I see these long words, I may not understand them and get confused. But when I can go back home and actually research them, or have a tool on my phone that lets me research them, then I'm going to be able to make an informed decision.
Mare, you know, when we first talked about the show several weeks ago, I had remembered the DVD. As I thought, you know, that says it says very little about animal research. How much did you find about animal research when you saw the story of cosmetics?
No, she doesn't mention anything about it.
Nothing.
Nothing about it. I don't know if she's not aware of it or if she is. My initial reaction was that she's, you know, sort of on their side, you know, wanting to get all this testing. I mean, Europe's got the REACH program, you know, where they're trying to get, you know,
well, we just got a little bit of time left. What do you think the most important concepts that you would like people to take away?
I agree with Christen. I mean, the consumer is what pushes advancement. I mean, they're the ones that get, you know, laws made. You have to, you know, vote with your dollars. That's the main thing. And, you know, contact, you know, if you're passionate about the animal testing, or you're, you know, whatever you're passionate about, definitely, you know, let your representatives know that, especially with this alternative testing. I mean, it's important to let your representatives know that they need to, you know, get the fire going under these committees.
So you think that the current proposed legislation is not adequate, and you would really like to see more stringent?
Well, I don't think this act's going to pass, honestly, because as it's written, there's just so many chemicals involved. I don't know if the FDA and all the regulatory agencies would even have the manpower, the money to go through it, you know, to evaluate all this data.
It's just
my
enormous.
Opinion, my humble opinion.
Christen and Mare, I want to thank both of you for joining us on this episode of Green Time. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and be sure to look at the next episode of Green Time.